Paul Ryan is now out. And what's been fascinating to see is how the left and how the media have reacted to Paul Ryan leaving. So for a long time, they were looking at Paul Ryan as though he was the future of the party. He was the alternative to Trump. And there were a lot of people who were thinking that this was a Trump-Ryan battle. That was the battle that really mattered. Now, listen, President Trump won the presidency, and that battle ended in a certain way with a rapprochement, which is that President Trump was going to be the attitude of the party, and Paul Ryan was going to be the idea man of the party. And that's essentially how things worked for the first year. Because let's be real, most of Trump's sort of heretical priorities, the things like trade wars or infrastructure plans, those things didn't go anywhere with Paul Ryan in the House. The stuff that actually did move were some regulatory reform measures, were the tax cuts, the attempt to restructure entitlements in the tax bill, right? All of that was Paul Ryan stuff. So what you actually got was Paul Ryan type governance in many areas and Donald Trump style rhetoric. That was the sort of agreement that Republicans came to. But with Ryan out, now what you're seeing is an attempt to recast this entire battle as a battle between Ryan and Trump, even though Ryan was actually pushing a lot of Trump's priorities and Trump was signing a lot of Ryan's priorities. That doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And this misread, I think, is an attempt to paint everyone in the Republican Party as sort of beholden to everything bad about Trump. See, this is the goal of the left now. So the left tried to do this in 2016 by calling everybody a deplorable who supported President Trump. Now what they're attempting to do is they're attempting to say that anyone who even tangentially worked with President Trump actually made a Faustian bargain with President Trump. This is the tenor of the media coverage. And I don't think that that's correct. I don't think it's a Faustian bargain at all to say, listen, I don't like President Trump's character. I don't like what he's been doing on character, but I like a lot of his policy. That doesn't seem like a Faustian bargain at all. That seems like normal politics on a pretty daily basis in Washington, D.C., where everybody sucks and where the politics is what matters in the end. The policy is what's supposed to matter in the end. But Paul Ryan was asked about this by Jake Tapper. Tapper on CNN said to Ryan, did you make a Faustian bargain with President Trump?
I'm really proud of the accomplishments we have here. And so I don't see this as some Faustian bargain, devil's bargain, or whatever it is you call it. I see it as the country said, go fix these problems. You guys get the majority in the House. You get the majority in the Senate. Here's the presidency. Now go do something with it. That's what we're doing. That's not devil's bargain. That's actually doing what the people in this country asked us to do and keeping our word. And I'm very proud of that fact.
I mean, I'm wondering what exactly the media mean when they say things like devil's bargains. Do they mean that Paul Ryan has not been critical of Trump on character grounds? Because that's not true. Do they mean that Paul Ryan has sometimes soft-pedaled those character criticisms in order to get policy done? Maybe that's true, but he's also working with a Republican. He's working with a president in his own party, and he has to keep his eye on the prize when it comes to policy making, which, after all, is his job as Speaker of the House. Tapper continued to push Ryan on this on CNN yesterday, saying, does Trump embarrass you?
I know after the Access Hollywood tape came out in October 2016, Mr. Trump was asked not to appear at an event for you. Now it's back in the news in a major way. This must bother you. Access Hollywood, Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal. At a certain point, it must be embarrassing.
Well, look, I didn't even read the article. I mean, I'm obviously familiar with what you're talking about. So we're pretty focused on just getting our work done here. And so this is something that I'll let you guys speculate about. Right now, I'm busy trying to get things done in Congress. We've got a big agenda here. And so that's kind of where my focus is. And I don't really have much punditry to offer you on this. And look, I just think the way the president ought to handle this is compartmentalize it and focus on doing your job. We've got issues with Syria. We've got a balanced budget amendment we're passing this week. We've got a lot to do, and that's what I'm focused on.
So here's what's hilarious about this. Basically, if you're Paul Ryan and you're just a guy who's trying to get an agenda through, you're just trying to get some things done, you're getting ripped by the right as somebody who's not sufficiently supportive of President Trump, even while you're pushing President Trump's agenda, and you're being ripped by the left for not going out there and ripping Trump every day. Well, for Paul Ryan and for a lot of other Congress people who I'm talking to in Congress, Trump is not the top of their priority list. They weren't elected 10, 15, 20 years ago to be beholden to Trump, nor were they elected 10, 20, 30 years ago in order for them to shift their entire schedule of their day around reacting in the media to what President Trump does, either negative or positive. And so, when Paul Ryan says, listen, I'm going to keep my nose to the grindstone and do what I'm supposed to do, he gets ripped on both sides. It's pretty astonishing. And I think Meghan McCain made a really good point yesterday. So Meghan McCain obviously is John McCain's daughter. And yesterday on The View, there were a bunch of people who were, all the left was cheering Paul Ryan leaving as Speaker of the House. They say, oh, it's just so great that Paul Ryan is out because Paul Ryan is a shill and Paul Ryan hasn't stood up to Trump and all the rest of this stuff. All these same Democrats who never stood up to Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton one iota. And now it's about Paul Ryan who didn't stand up to Trump, even though during the election cycle, Paul Ryan actually did stand up to then candidate Trump in the middle of the election cycle and disinvited him from a particular event after the Access Hollywood tape and told all the members of his Republican caucus that he wasn't going to be openly campaigning for Trump up till the election. Right? But this was not enough for the folks on the left. They say that, they're really happy that Ryan is going. And Meghan McCain makes a good point. She says, listen, if Ryan is not sufficient for you in terms of his sort of tenor, then why exactly wouldn't people vote for President Trump?
Though, what do you want? If Paul Ryan isn't good enough and people, but that's not logical. We shouldn't want that. We live in a democracy. We should want two healthy parties debating against each other. But if Paul Ryan is the greatest sin, this is how we got Trump. Because if Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney and people like this are the worst kind of politicians, then you deserve Trump. Because he's not. He's a truly decent man that was trying to fight for democracy and conservative ideals. And now what's going to be left, I have no idea.
Okay, good for Meghan McCain. This is exactly right. What Meghan McCain is saying here is exactly right. The left sits around, they wonder, how did we get Trump? How did we get Trump? By calling Paul Ryan the worst. By calling Mitt Romney the worst. By suggesting that people who were decent were actually bad. And then you know what the right did? They said, well, maybe it was their decency that lost them the election. Maybe what we need is an indecent man who punches in order to win an election. And then Trump won on exactly that basis. And then you're wondering why the right has resonated to President Trump? You're seeing this sort of coverage across the spectrum from folks on the left. Tim Alberta, who actually used to work at National Review, so he's not a left-winger, but he writes now for Politico, and he has a whole article called The Tragedy of Paul Ryan. He began as a Jack Kemp conservative. He ended as Donald Trump's man on Capitol Hill. That's not remotely true. He was not Donald Trump's man on Capitol Hill. He was trying to push against a lot of Trumpian priorities. It was Paul Ryan who was attempting to end around Mitch McConnell and get some actual things done. Now, again, I'm not a huge advocate of Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House. I don't think Paul Ryan was the best Speaker of the House in the world. I don't think that he was the worst Speaker of the House in the world. I think he was better than John Boehner. I think he was worse than Newt Gingrich. And I think he's somewhere in the middle. But this newfound attempt to paint Ryan leaving as anything but Ryan leaving because he doesn't want to be blamed for a blue wave that is not his fault is, I think, revisionist history on both sides. So on the left, they're saying Paul Ryan is leaving because Trump has taken over the party. On the right, they're saying Paul Ryan is leaving because Trump has taken over the party. I don't think any of that is true. I mean, that's why President Trump was praising Paul Ryan yesterday, because in President Trump's view, correctly, Paul Ryan was an ally in helping him push some of his political priorities. But here's the article from Tim Alberta at Politico. He says, Paul Ryan came to Congress as a Jack Kemp conservative and will depart as a Donald Trump Republican. It's more complicated than that, certainly. History requires nuance and texture, but legacies are reductive by nature. The House Speaker announced his retirement Wednesday, closing a messy and mesmerizing chapter in the history of the Republican Party. And for the affable Wisconsin kid who moved to Washington a quarter century ago, eager to make his mark on fiscal policy, the harsh reality is that he might be remembered more for accommodating the impulses of the 45th president than for crafting a generational overhaul of the tax code. This is a political obituary of Ryan's own writing. His silence in the face of Trump's indignities and his observance of the exquisite presidential leadership, a line that will live in infamy, would be less remarkable had he not first established himself as one of Congress's good guys, someone whose sense of principle and decency informed his objections to Trump's candidacy in the first place. Indeed, the speaker's habit of turning a blind eye to the president's behavior is relevant and revelatory because it was not always so. There was hardly a tougher Trump critic during the 2016 campaign than Ryan, who felt duty-bound to combat the candidate's dark rhetoric and the party's nativist drift. Yet there has hardly been anyone softer on Trump since Election Day than Ryan, who felt duty-bound to deliver on the policy promises made to voters and decided that doing so meant ignoring the ad hominem savaging of private citizens, the hush money paid to porn stars, the attacks on private companies, the attempts to delegitimize institutions, and the innumerable other acts for which Barack Obama would have been impaled by the right. This was Paul's deal with the devil, a phrase used by several of the speaker's confidants in the days following Trump's shocking triumph. So, again, the idea here from some of these folks is that presumably, I guess, the idea is that Paul Ryan should have been out front all the time, spending his time ripping on President Trump. This would have pleased a lot of the folks on the left. Now, listen, I'm in the business of political commentating. This is what I do for a living. And so one of the things I'm able to do is when I think Trump has done something wrong, I will rip him for it. And when I think President Trump does something right, I will praise him to the skies. And this is something that I am able to do. But I also am not in the position of having to negotiate with President Trump over policy. So to pretend that Paul Ryan's sole job was to comment on President Trump's doings day in and day out is to ignore the role of the legislature in the process. Now, I think if Paul Ryan committed any great sin, it was not standing up to Trump and McConnell on policy, not even on Trump's character. Listen, would I prefer that all Republicans played the same fiddle that I'm playing? Sure. I would prefer that when Donald Trump does something bad, all Republicans said that's bad. And when Donald Trump does something good, all Republicans say that's good. And that would include legislators. But these are the people who also have to negotiate with Trump. And there is a bit of practicality that has to take place here with regard to how you get policy done that you have promised your own constituents. This may be the last time in our modern history that Republicans run all the branches of government. And you expect Paul Ryan, to blow that on a daily basis by talking about Donald Trump's dumb tweets when everybody already knows Donald Trump's tweets are dumb? Again, the media are really driving people toward Trump because a bunch of people on the right are simply going to respond to all of this by saying very simply, listen, you don't like Paul Ryan? We'll give you somebody who really doesn't care what you think. We'll give you Donald Trump.